Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I had imagined that night at least 100 times over the past year, probably more, and in every version of it, I was glowing, maybe a little overwhelmed, but surrounded by people who looked at me like I finally mattered. I didn't need the red carpet or some Instagram-perfect photo shoot, just a moment that was mine after years of feeling like background noise in my own family. Jason had proposed last fall, under a sycamore tree in Vermont, with my grandmother's ring and trembling hands that made me cry harder than I expected. We waited to throw the party until spring because I'd always hated winter events. People are colder, quieter, more checked out. I wanted color, warmth, life. I wanted a table filled with people who could finally say, "Good for her, she did it." The venue wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful in the way that simplicity often is when you put enough thought behind it. Twinkling lights, soft jazz in the background, a little garden in the back where I used to play tag with Emily when we were kids. Denise helped me pick the dress. It was off-white, elegant, and just dramatic enough to make me feel like a woman had made it through some storms. Jason looked incredible in navy, and when we arrived, the air felt like the exact temperature of hope. People clapped, hugged, said all the right things. For the first hour, I floated through that space like someone who had finally been allowed center stage. My mother, who usually only complimented me when I'd changed my hair, actually touched my face and said I looked radiant. My father, stiff in a collared shirt, offered up a quiet, "You done good, kid." Even Aunt Linda cried, which she only does at funerals and championship games. But then she topped the glass. The sound was light, barely louder than the music, but something in the way the room still told me that whatever came next wasn't going to sit right with me. Emily stood near the dessert table, champagne flute in hand, glowing like she was the one who just got engaged. Her dress was a soft pink, tight around the middle, and I remember noting it was an odd choice, too baby shower adjacent for a grown-up cocktail event. But maybe I knew before she said it. Maybe some part of me, some bitter older sister instinct, had already picked up the scent. She smiled, and then she said it. I hope this doesn't steal too much thunder, but I'm expecting applause. Real loud, clapping applause like we were at a damn award show. My mother stood up and hugged her like a soldier back from war. My father, caught somewhere between confusion and resignation, gave a half smile. Jason leaned toward me like he was waiting for a cue, but I couldn't find any words to give him. And just like that, the night wasn't mine anymore. It wasn't even just the announcement. It was the timing. It was the smug little smile she gave when people gathered around her, touching her belly like she was already 8 months along. It was the way my mother raised her glass and toasted to new beginnings, as if mine wasn't enough. As if mine wasn't even happening. I stood there, holding my wine like an idiot, while people I hadn't seen in years swarmed my sister and asked if she was hoping for a boy or a girl. I didn't cry. That's something I want to make clear. I didn't storm out, didn't make a scene, didn't even say anything sharp. I smiled. I fucking smiled and posed for pictures and gave hugs and thanked everyone for coming like a well-trained PR puppet. Denise caught my eye once and gave me a look, half sympathy, half "don't you dare lose it here." I didn't. I held it together until the last guest left and then locked myself in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub, staring at a version of myself I didn't quite recognize. Jason knocked and asked if I was okay, and I said yes, even though we both knew I wasn't. He asked if I wanted to talk about it, and I said not tonight. I think he meant well, but what could he possibly say? This wasn't about him. This was a lifetime of second-place ribbons, of birthdays where Emily's dance recital took center stage, of college acceptances overshadowed by her breakup drama, of always being the one who held the family together while she set the house on fire. So I got up, washed my face, and went to bed next to the man I loved, pretending I didn't hear my sister laughing in the hallway on her way out. Pretending I wasn't mapping out a strategy. Because here's the thing, Emily's always been the golden one, the favorite, the the sparkling disaster everyone forgives because she's charming when she needs to be. But that night, something snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, with precision. I stopped caring about being liked. I stopped caring about being the good daughter. That night, I smiled through it. But the next morning, I woke up and chose violence. Emotional, elegant violence. The first lie Emily ever told that got me in real trouble happened in the backyard, under the old walnut tree, during one of those sticky Virginia summers when school was out but the tension in the house never took a vacation. I was 9 and she was 5, and we'd been playing some made-up game involving sticks, fairy kingdoms, and invisible dragons. I remember because I'd just finished reading The Hobbit and wanted her to respect the rules of mythical warfare, which, of course, she didn't. At some point, she tripped over a root and landed hard, skinned her elbow, let out a scream like I'd stabbed her with a knife, and ran to Mom, sobbing. Told her I pushed her. Not even accidentally, just flat out blamed me like it was nothing, like throwing me under the bus was her natural reflex. I tried to explain, tried to say she was lying, but it didn't matter. My mom grounded me for 3 weeks, which is like almost a whole month of weekends, and gave me the silent treatment the entire time, like I'd broken some unspoken rule about not making her favorite child cry. At the time, it didn't feel like some pivotal trauma. It was just another page in a scrapbook of tiny injustices that made up our childhood, a pattern that became so normal I didn't even realize I was carrying it into adulthood. Emily was always the one with the charm, the big blue eyes, the dramatic sighs, and the tears that could appear on cue. I, on the other hand, was the one who didn't get asked twice to do chores, who never got out of dinner cleanup, who got told I was too sensitive whenever I pushed back. Now, decades later, sitting on the couch with my knees pulled up and a glass of wine sweating in my hand, I realized that same pattern had never changed, only matured. The stakes were higher, sure, but the rules were the same. Emily cried, and I paid. Emily smiled, and everyone clapped. Emily dropped a bomb in the middle of my engagement party, and people actually thanked her for it. And I became a footnote in my own celebration. The older sister. The stable one. The one who would understand. Jason sat across from me that morning, quiet, watching me pick at a stale piece of toast like it owed me money. He tried to keep his tone light, but I could feel the weight of his words before he even said them. She probably didn't mean anything by it, he offered, his voice like a peace treaty I hadn't asked for. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Because the thing is, when someone hurts you in a calculated way, pretending it was innocent feels like adding insult to injury. I wanted him to see it, to name it, to call it what it was, a deliberate, well-timed blow. Instead, he tried to minimize it, to soften it, and in doing so, made me feel even more alone. Jason, I finally said. She announced her pregnancy in the middle of my speech. That's not an accident. That's strategy. He blinked like I'd just accused her of setting a fire, and maybe in a way, I had. I didn't expect him to declare war on my behalf, but I wanted more than just neutrality. I wanted him to say what I wasn't ready to admit out loud, that Emily had always been this way, and I had always let her win. Later that afternoon, Denise stopped by, uninvited but welcome, holding 2 iced coffees and a look on her face like she'd just read the last chapter of a book she didn't want to finish. So, she said, kicking off her sandals and collapsing onto my couch, "Do you want to know the part that'll really piss you off?" I didn't answer because I already knew I did. "She told your mom about the pregnancy a week ago." "A whole week?" "Your mom helped her pick the damn dress." It landed in my chest like a brick, not because I was surprised, but because the confirmation made it real. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated, pre-approved, maybe even rehearsed. And the person who was supposed to protect my moment, my mother, had sat there clapping like a seal while my sister hijacked my night. I thought back to that backyard again, to the scraped elbow and the lie, and realized this had always been our dynamic. Emily caused the scene, and I served the sentence. I stood up, pacing, gripping my coffee like it could steady me. Denise didn't say anything else, just watched me with the kind of quiet fury only best friends know how to offer. And somewhere between my third lap across the living room and the fourth, something inside me shifted. Maybe I couldn't change who Emily was. Maybe I couldn't undo years of being the family's second thought. But I sure as hell could stop playing the role they'd written for me. If Emily wanted center stage, she could have it, but I was going to steal the whole damn theater. Because when someone spends their whole life stepping on your toes, the best revenge isn't stepping back. It's learning to dance better, louder, bolder, and without apology. And if she thought I'd sit quietly in her shadow forever, then my next move was going to be one hell of a surprise. There's a certain kind of clarity that only comes in the quietest part of the morning, when the sky is still bruised and unsure of itself, and the world hasn't yet decided what kind of day it's going to be. That's when I wrote the message, barefoot, in a robe, with my hair still smelling like last night's frustration. I didn't even sit at my desk. I stood at the kitchen counter like a woman about to make something dangerous, fingers moving over the keyboard while the coffee maker hissed in the background, almost like it knew what was coming. I wasn't angry, not in the way people mean it, red-faced, shouting, storming through the house, slamming doors. I was something quieter, meaner, and far more dangerous than that. I was clear. I was done playing the part of the older sister who smiles through every insult, who absorbs the spotlight being yanked away from her like it's part of some spiritual exercise in selflessness. The message started simple, and that's what made it so beautiful. I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't even hint that I was upset. That would have made it too easy for them to paint me as the problem. No, I went for something sweeter than sugar, the kind of sweetness that coats your teeth before it eats away at the root. I wrote, "Thank you all so much for being part of such a special night. It meant the world to Jason and me to celebrate this once-in-a-lifetime moment with people we love and trust. Your presence made everything feel warmer, more real, and unforgettable." And it was true, parts of it, anyway. That night was unforgettable. Just not for the reasons I'd imagined. Then came the line that would split the family group chat in two, the one I reread maybe 7 or 8 times before hitting send, because I wanted the tone to land just right like a paper cut to the ego. "Special congrats to Emily. I can't wait to meet the baby. I just hope they're more punctual than you've ever been. Short, sweet, but sharp enough to draw blood." That sentence carried decades of resentment tucked into less than 20 words, and I knew it would explode with just enough subtlety to keep me technically innocent. I hit send, finished my coffee, and waited. It didn't take long. By noon, my phone was buzzing like a broken faucet. Messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Screenshots from Denise with captions like, "You absolute savage," and "I am screaming." Aunt Linda called it petty genius and added that she hadn't laughed that hard since Grandpa forgot Grandma's name at their 50th anniversary dinner. My mother, of course, didn't find it funny at all. She sent a passive-aggressive text saying, "I know you're still emotional, but was that necessary?" I didn't reply. I wasn't in the mood to explain the difference between cruelty and precision. But Emily didn't text. She didn't call. She showed up. It was just after 5 when she pounded on my apartment door like she was trying to wake the dead, and I knew, just from the rhythm of her knocking, that I'd hit something deep. When I opened the door, she was already halfway through her first accusation. "You made me look like a fucking joke," she spat, eyes wide, cheeks red, hair wild like she hadn't even brushed it before grabbing her keys. I leaned against the doorframe and looked her straight in the face, not blinking. "No, Em. You did that all by yourself." She stared at me like I'd just spoken in a language she didn't recognize. And maybe, in a way, I had. I wasn't speaking the older sister language anymore, the one where I apologize first, where I make it okay, where I smooth things over because nobody else will. I'd finally flipped the script, and she didn't know how to read it. She ranted for a few minutes, calling me spiteful, childish, toxic, the usual words people throw around when you stop letting them walk all over you. I let her talk. I didn't raise my voice, didn't interrupt, didn't even move. I just let her burn herself out. When she finally stopped, breathing hard, mascara starting to smudge at the corners, I gave her the line I'd rehearsed in my head the moment I hit send. "You've had the stage your whole life, Em." I took a single line. "If that breaks you, maybe the stage was never really yours." She left without slamming the door, which surprised me. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor like an angry metronome. And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Later that night, Jason found the original draft of the message. The one I'd started writing before I decided to be subtle. The one that didn't hold back. It had phrases like, "Thanks for turning my celebration into your sideshow," and "Here's hoping your baby's better at boundaries than you." It was blunt, brutal, and honest in a way I couldn't bring myself to send. Not because I didn't mean it, but because I knew I didn't need it. Precision always lands better than volume. Jason stood in the hallway, holding the printed-out version I'd forgotten in the trash, eyes scanning it like he was reading the diary of someone he didn't quite recognize. "Is this who you are now?" he asked, not angry, not accusatory, just quiet. Hesitant. Like he wasn't sure who he was talking to. I looked at him, thought about all the years I'd swallowed my own pain just to keep things nice, thought about every time my mother brushed me aside or Emily stole the spotlight and no one said a damn word. "No," I said, "this is who I've always been. I just stopped hiding it." He didn't say anything else. He folded the page and left it on the counter like a piece of evidence he wasn't ready to throw away. And I stood there, wondering if what I'd just done was a victory or a warning shot. Wondering which one I'd need next. It was somewhere around 10:30 at night when my phone lit up with Denise's name, and I knew immediately she wasn't calling just to chat or ask if I'd seen the latest dumb crime documentary we usually dissect over cheap wine and sarcasm. There was a rhythm to her calls, middle of the day for venting, dinner time for catching up, late at night for truth bombs. And that night, I could hear it in her voice before she even finished saying my name. Something was wrong, and it had my sister's fingerprints all over it. "Kara," she said, voice low like someone was in the room with her, which turned out to be partially true. She'd been at a friend of a friend's birthday party, where someone from college, a girl named Talia who had known Emily during her short-lived nutritionist phase, had dropped a piece of information that practically rewrote the whole damn script. Emily's pregnancy, it turned out, wasn't the dreamy, planned, fairy tale narrative she'd floated into the middle of my engagement party. It wasn't even close. The father, if you could even call him that, was a guy named Aiden, someone she'd been seeing casually until he ghosted her 3 months ago. No goodbye, no warning, no heart-wrenching goodbye text. Just vanished. Poof. And she hadn't heard from him since. Apparently, she'd tried to reconnect, called from different numbers, even showed up at the gym he managed part-time, but he was already seeing someone new, a barista, 22, with a nose ring and no patience for drama. And the kicker? Emily wasn't even sure Aiden knew she was pregnant. Or if he was the only possible option. That part came out in a whisper from Denise, like she was afraid the walls of my apartment might hear and tell the neighbors. My chest tightened, not out of shock, but because something in me had suspected it all along. That night wasn't about sharing joy. It wasn't even about the baby. It was about stealing back attention, controlling the room, getting ahead of something before it got ahead of her. The truth wasn't that Emily was glowing with the radiance of impending motherhood. She was cornered, scrambling, and had decided that the best way to stabilize her spiraling narrative was to hijack mine. And it worked, because no one questions the girl who cries happy tears and clutches her stomach while everyone applauds. What hit me even harder than the gossip was the second half of what Denise said, the part she almost didn't tell me. Apparently, my mother had known the whole story. Not just about the pregnancy, but about the uncertainty, the guy disappearing, the panic. And she told Emily to go ahead and say something at the party anyway. Announce something happy, she'd said, according to Denise's source. Before Kara makes it all about herself. That sentence echoed in my head like a bell rung in a locked room, bouncing off the walls of every memory I had with that woman. Every backhanded compliment, every time she told me I was too intense, too dramatic, too sensitive, and every time she looked at Emily like she was a precious gem just slightly cracked. My mother hadn't just allowed the sabotage. She'd encouraged it. Because to her, I was always the one who took up too much space. The one who made other people uncomfortable just by having emotions. And if Emily's little bombshell could soften the edges of my supposed selfishness, then that was just good strategy in her book. It was like looking at a puzzle I'd spent years pretending was just missing pieces, only to realize the whole damn thing was upside down from the start. It wasn't just Emily who needed the spotlight. It was the whole damn system that propped her up. My parents had built a house where I was the scaffolding, strong, quiet, necessary, while Emily got the windows and wallpaper and holiday lights. And I had let them. For years, I had let them. But now? Now they were about to learn what happened when the scaffolding decides to stop holding everything up. I didn't say much to Denise that night, except thank you. Not because I didn't feel more, I did more than I could even name, but because the part of me that used to vent and spiral and seek comfort was being replaced by something colder, sharper. I didn't want comfort anymore. I wanted clarity. I wanted results. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, walking barefoot across my hardwood floors, sipping whiskey I usually saved for celebrating, thinking about what I could do next. Not say, do. Words had their moment, and I'd already seen how the family twisted them, diluted them, called them dramatic, and then moved on like nothing ever happened. But actions? Real, irreversible, calculated actions? That's what they wouldn't see coming. There was something I'd been sitting on for months, something Jason and I had discussed in quiet whispers, late at night, half joking but half serious, a private courthouse wedding, no guests, no fanfare. Just the two of us and a bottle of champagne in a hotel room afterward. At the time, I hadn't considered it seriously because I thought my family deserved a seat at the table. Now I realized they never did. The next day, I texted Jason while he was at work. I kept it simple. We need to talk. About doing this our way. No details. No drama. Just intent. Because while Emily had been playing checkers on a board made of emotional landmines, I'd been watching the whole damn game from above. And now? It was my move. The sky was turning that soft orange-gray blend you only get in late spring when it's warm enough to keep the windows cracked open but cool enough that nobody's sweating through their shirts at the dinner table. My mother had chosen the restaurant not because she thought we liked it, but because it had white tablecloths and a wine list long enough to impress her bridge friends, even though none of them were invited. It was supposed to be a family catch-up dinner, one of those fake neutral events that pretended to be innocent, but always carried an undercurrent of tension, just waiting to be stirred. Emily was already there when Jason and I arrived, sitting too close to my mother, laughing too loud, sipping something sparkling and gesturing with her hands like she was narrating a sitcom. Jason reached for my hand under the table as we sat down, and I squeezed his fingers once, not for comfort, but for confirmation. This was it. This was the play we'd agreed on, executed with the kind of precision usually reserved for court depositions and controlled demolitions. I hadn't worn white. I hadn't worn anything flashy. Just a simple green wrap dress, the one Denise once told me made me look like I had secrets, and tonight, I did. We waded through the appetizers, the clinking of glasses, the backhanded compliments, and the long-winded story from my uncle about how traffic isn't what it used to be, because apparently even gridlock used to be better in the old days. My mother asked about wedding venues, all fake curious and stiff like she was being polite to a cashier. Emily smiled into her drink and said something like, "Oh yes, you must be swamped with planning," and I could feel Jason's hand tense again under the table. But I waited. I let the salad plates get cleared, let the second bottle of wine get poured, let my mother make a comment about how pregnancy glows really do run in the family. And then I cleared my throat. Actually, I said, and it came out calm. Too calm. Like I'd rehearsed it in the mirror, which, to be fair, I had. There won't be a wedding. The silence hit the table like a dropped dish. 1 second of clinking glasses and chewing, and then nothing. All heads turned. My mother blinked. Emily tilted her head like she'd misheard me. I didn't wait for anyone to ask. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, tapped it twice, and slid it across the table like a lawyer presenting Exhibit A. A photo filled the screen, me and Jason under an old tree, surrounded by green hills, the sun catching the edge of my smile and his hand on my waist. A little vineyard on the edge of town, no guests, just a justice of the peace, 2 rings, and one perfect afternoon with no drama, no interruptions, and absolutely no thunder stolen. My mother picked up the phone and squinted, not because she couldn't see it, but because she didn't want to believe what she was seeing. Emily leaned over her shoulder, mouth slightly open, already filling with whatever opinion she was about to launch across the table like a grenade. I beat her to it. We eloped last weekend, I said, still calm, still smiling. No fuss, no guest list. Just the 2 of us. Turns out, when I'm not competing with a fetus, I know how to make a moment mine. Jason didn't flinch. That was the deal. I would speak, and he would hold steady, like a rock, like the partner I knew he was, even when the rest of them kept trying to shrink me back into someone smaller. Someone easier to manage. Emily stood up so fast her water glass nearly tipped. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out at first, like her brain couldn't keep up with the moment. Finally, she snapped something about how selfish I was, how weddings were about family, about unity, about being part of something larger than yourself. I let her finish, let her feel the space her voice took up, let her own the silence that followed. Then I shrugged, the smallest motion, like brushing off lint. You had your moment, I said, not bitter, not cruel, just true. This one wasn't for you. She stormed out, heels clicking hard against the tile, my mother calling after her with half a voice, torn between following and staying, looking down at her phone like it had betrayed her by confirming I'd acted without permission. Then something strange happened. My father, who'd barely spoken all night, who usually lived in the quiet shadow of my mother's disapproval and Emily's chaos, put down his fork, looked at me, and clapped. Just once. Just a single, flat, loud clap that echoed louder than it should have. Then he nodded, reached for his drink, and said nothing else. The table split like wood under pressure. Half the people tried to ignore the awkwardness, the other half didn't know where to look. Jason and I stayed for dessert. Not because we were hungry, but because we'd earned the seat, and I wasn't about to leave it just because the room got uncomfortable. Later, in the car, Jason asked if I felt better. I didn't answer right away. I rolled down the window and let the air rush in, thinking about everything I'd just burned down. A sister, a mother's last thread of control, maybe even the fragile piece Jason wanted to keep between families. I don't know if I did the right thing, I said finally, as we passed the streetlights and blinking storefronts of the town that had never really known who I was. Maybe I burned too much. Maybe I lost more than I gained. Jason didn't say anything. He didn't need to. But for once, I added, softer now, it was my story, not hers. And if that makes me the villain in their version of events, if that makes me the storm they whisper about over dinner and in church pews and after baby showers, then maybe I'm finally okay being the one they whisper about. Because I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted my name back. And I took it.